Hello, everyone. David Morris here. I'm publisher of Lake Drive Books, where we publish books to help you heal, grow, and discover. And I'm joined today by author Sarah Henn Hayward. Great to be with you,
Hello,
Sarah. How are you doing today?
doing great. We are getting in some really beautiful fall weather right now, which sometimes in my region, fall is like a week long, but we've already had a few weeks of it. So I'm very happy right now.
What part of the world are you in for those who don't
The
know?
Pacific Northwest. And so I'm in Eastern Washington. We get all four seasons, but you just never know what you're going to get with spring and fall. But we've
Yeah,
had, yeah, like 70 degrees, sunny, just really, really
yeah.
nice days. My kids are starting soccer, so we're outside a lot practicing and going to games, and it's been
Yeah.
really nice to do all that. So yeah, doing well.
So you're a mom, you're a
Hmm.
marriage partner,
Hmm.
um, you're also professionally trained in a big way as
Yes, I'm a doctor of physical therapy. So I currently work at an assisted living facility, so like a nursing home kind of situation. Most of my patients are in their 80s. I've got a handful of 100+ year olds, and I like to say I have
wow.
40 grandmas. I just get to work with all these old folks, and I really love it. I've been there. It's a newer setting for me. I had always worked in outpatient ortho before that, with kind of more sports injuries and pain, but the
Yeah.
pandemic jostled everything all up. So I landed at the nursing home, and I really have been loving it.
So you know about how to stay young for people who are older.
Yeah, that's another book idea down the road, is a book
Quality of,
on aging
yeah,
well. Yeah.
yeah. But you also know a lot about the body and how it works.
Hmm.
And there's even some things in your book like about feet, I think,
Hmm. Yeah, I touch on
about
the
the
evolution of,
evolution. Yeah.
yeah.
Tell us about that briefly.
Yeah, I so for a brief period of time I operated my own physical therapy clinic, and so during that time I read a book by Jeremy De Silva called First Steps, and it was all about human evolution, starting way back when we are an ape, but more of an ape living in trees. And it was asking the question, when did we start walking on 2 feet? Because humans are the only mammal that really does that. And so it's just fascinating, and learning about the human foot specifically. It's so wonky. It's so cattywampus, because it first developed to be able to grip tree branches because we walked in the trees mostly, and then it had to become better for walking on ground over the years. So there's all these old anatomies and old ways that the foot functions that don't really make sense for a creature like us that walks on 2 feet all the time, which is why in my job we get a lot of plantar fasciitis and shin splints and bunions and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was interesting to learn about. And for me, that was the first time I really had learned about evolution in a meaningful way, because I had kind of covered my ears during school, because that was in my height of my conservative Christian days. So it was really fun to just fill in some gaps of my
Yeah.
knowledge.
So it's almost like saying that evolution doesn't always keep up with Homo sapien lifestyle.
Well, really, what it's saying is we were not just created out of the dust as is.
Hmm.
We've slowly gotten here through a twisty path, and there was things that suited us in an old version of ourselves that now don't really make sense or suit us. We still have a coccyx bone. We don't have tails anymore.
Yeah.
We still have
Yeah.
wisdom teeth that we mostly rip out because we don't need them. So there's
Yeah.
parts of our body that used to serve a function. The
Yeah.
wisdom teeth, I think, are from when we ate a lot more raw plants,
Right.
and needed that chewing power. And now, the way our
Right.
bodies are today, we don't need all that stuff. So yeah, it's just this long, twisty road, and there's leftover bits.
So even in your professional life, you've experienced something that I think a lot of people do, and that is that the sort of worldview that was offered by your religion
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily like questions start coming up, even just by virtue of developing yourself professionally and learning more, in your case, about science and how the body has evolved over the years.
Hmm.
Um, so back us up a little bit. So your book, we're talking
Hmm.
about before it's come out. It's coming
Yeah.
out soon. It's called Giving Up God. Now you're gonna have to help me with the subtitle because we
I
just
know.
jumped into
Giving
this.
up God, resurrecting a spirituality of love and wonder. Yes.
So that is wonderful. So So it's telling you tell me, it's telling a story from the past, but also how you're looking forward, isn't it?
Yeah, so the deconstruction movement is huge, and there's a lot of people that have deconstructed their faith, and a lot of great books that I read that walked with me along in that journey. So my book does start off with kind of, I call it my testimony. That's sort of a retro testimony in reverse of becoming less religious. Um, so I do open the book talking about my deconstruction journey and all the questions that started popping up, and how things just stopped making sense, and the mental gymnastics I went through to try to make God still work and still be a believable concept, until eventually I couldn't. And I got to the point where I could not liberalize God anymore enough. I couldn't science enough in there to make it work. And so really for me at that point, when I finally to myself admitted, I just don't think this concept of God, certainly anything like the version I was taught, is real. I just can't get behind it anymore. And that was a real identity breaking point for me, because my identity was a Christian. I was a Christian. That was supposed to be my first and foremost thought, passion, drive, meaning in life. All my decisions were supposed to be, what would Jesus do, or living into God's will. And so walking away from that, it took away that huge foundation of who am I and what am I doing here. So really the book is me wrestling with finding my identity again. Who am I if I'm not a Christian? What is my life for if not to serve this God up in the heavens, to try to make that proud? So it's a story of my identity trying to kind of find a new footing, and I redefine what is meaning and where do I get my morality from through more books I've read and things that I've learned a lot from learning about evolution and science and how connected we all are with all of the natural world, and learning a little bit from philosophy and things like that. So it's a book of rediscovering who I am 2.0, this new version of me that's no longer a person of religious faith. I still have faith in things and in certain concepts and ideas, but no longer in God. And that was a big deal. And I felt very alone in that journey and kind of on my own. So I wanted to write the book as a way to reach out to others who I'm sure have been in a similar boat or same boat as me, who are looking for some direction and just some community and comfort, knowing that you're not alone in that.
Reading your book early in the going, one of the things that stood out to me the most was that even though you do have a scientific profession,
Mm-hmm.
doctor of physical therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and and you've read widely, you're a big reader, even though those things, you don't approach this book necessarily as an expert. I've read a lot of experts about people analyzing faith from a very practical standpoint, very, very pragmatic standpoint. And I was a psychology and religion PhD. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's that in terms of how I've looked at things and the authors I've read. What you do, though, is you chart a course of changing your worldview just as an everyday person. You're not writing about it as someone from on high, but from on the
Mm-hmm.
ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's actually more rare than you might think. There's a lot of memoirs about people who've had difficult experiences with their religious backgrounds, and they describe that journey. But you write it more from just taking on the idea of theism, for example. How do you do that as an everyday person and not a theology expert necessarily?
Right.
I mean, you've got a lot of theology that you've covered, but that's what's so accessible about your book, because you kind of you bring the reader along in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what was one other thing that was like one of the big markers of, like a turning point for you in your faith? I know nature has always been a big part of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, like you said, I'm a big reader. I read a lot, and I have very eclectic taste. So I've always dabbled in a lot of different genres and nonfiction and fiction. And so sometimes I think this book is really a culmination of a lot of books I've read over the years, filtering them together and weaving them into this new sort of framework or
Mhm.
idea. So it touches on neuroscience, on quantum things, on physical therapy in our bodies, on the evolution. So I think, yeah, it's just taking this journey that I've been on for the last really 15 years and condensing it and making it personal. Because like you said, a lot of those books can get really heady, especially the theology books. And I had to take 3 semesters of theology class at Marquette University where I went. So I'm familiar with that world and that language a bit. But I wanted to just make it real, make it something that, yeah, an average person could read and understand and make sense of. So yeah, I kind of think of my book as being a bit of a translator, taking all these other ideas and concepts and something that you can grasp. As far as turning point in my faith, it was a lot of things, and that's why it was a slow burn. For me, it was really a 15-year-long process. For the longest time, I thought I would just be a deconstructed Christian and a very progressive, open-minded Christian. I never expected or wanted or planned on leaving the faith. But just the more I learned, the more I read really about, I guess you could say, science, but also thinking about the questions of evil, thinking about free will. It all kind of started falling apart. I just pulled on enough loose strings that the whole sweater unraveled. And it was really ultimately the schism for me was thinking about the question of evil. I was dwelling on that a lot during 2020 with George Floyd's murder and just all the racial tension that swelled up and came to a boil again that year. And I used to be able to explain evil by saying, well, God is love, but he had to give us free will. We had to be able to choose. And as I learned and read more about free will and really thought about it and just really kept digging and kept asking question after question, it just didn't hold up anymore. It wasn't a suitable answer for me. So it became easier to conceptualize a world without God, a world that just contains good and evil because humans make good and bad choices, and not that it was all part of some divine plan and that somebody did this on purpose. Because for a loving God to have made this world that we have on purpose, I have a hard time knowing how that God is love, or is this the best they could do? They couldn't come up with a better way that would entail a lot less suffering for a lot more people. See, ultimately, just my questions ran out of good answers.
And I think in terms of like labels, as far as those go, you wouldn't necessarily say you're atheist or agnostic. You wouldn't say you're Christian necessarily, but you have used the phrase poetic naturalist in your book. Not that you spend a ton of time on that, but it's a book about wonder more than it is about labels.
Right. Yeah, I do discuss kind of what to identify myself as or call myself, because people want to know. That's something that people ask, well, if you don't believe in God anymore, what do you believe, or what are you?
Yeah.
So I did kind of land on, I like poetic naturalist. That one involves a lot of explanation because most people don't know what that is or what you're saying.
Yeah.
The short, quick version, if somebody just asked me on the street, I do say I would consider myself an agnostic atheist. I don't think there's a higher being out there, but I don't claim to know with any level of certainty
everything. Yeah.
But poetic naturalism is just the idea that the natural world is it. That's all we have, that there is no other dimension of spiritual world, of heaven, of angels and demons and gods or ghosts or any of that, that there is no, the physical world is it. And that's kind of what naturalism is, which can go alongside a sense of nihilism, because it's sort of a meaningless existence. There is no afterlife to be searching for or aiming for, no heaven to be getting points toward or anything like that. So the poetic part of naturalism that Sean Carroll came up with the term, I believe it was his book I read, he says, just because maybe in the grand cosmic sense of things, there's no meaning and no design, no higher being that was in charge of this and has a purpose and a plan, doesn't mean that our own individual lives have to be or are meaningless, that we as humans create meaning all the time. We've created cultures. You think about a lot of things in the world are constructs, are human inventions. America isn't a real thing. We've defined the borders. We've defined what it means to be a citizen of a certain country.
It's a construct.
Yeah, so we do that all the time with all kinds of things, and we do it with meaning and with morality. And so you can still have a meaningful life that is full of beauty and that has a purpose, but it's more self-defined. And I think a lot of us are doing that already as it is. We maybe just don't recognize that. And so his book kind of just highlights that and points it out.
Right.
And says, you get to define meaning for yourself. You get to define success or what a good life looks like for yourself, which for me was very freeing to think about too.
Let me ask two more questions because we should wrap up. One is the big eternal question for so many people who are struggling with their religious backgrounds, and that is community. So you just spent time talking a little bit about meaning, and often and our faith communities, what we call church, combine those two things in a very intricate way, a very serious way often. So how do we find community around meaning? How do you see that happening in your life going forward?
I feel very fortunate in the sense that because most of my circle, my friends, my family, everybody are religious Christians, but most of them do fall into the deconstructed progressive camp, and so none of them have disowned me. So I haven't really lost any friends.
I don't think anybody would disown you, by the way. I just want to say that.
Well, that happens. People
it does
definitely
happen.
get ostracized if they, leave. And so publicly, I wrote a whole book about why I don't believe in God anymore. But shockingly, nobody's broken up with me as a friend. So I still have really good relationships. My friends still respect. There's mutual respect. We can agree to have different views of the ultimate, universe and the world and God. So I haven't, thankfully, lost any community. And actually, my husband is still a Christian and we still go to church. So I am still part of a church community that, again, I'm very fortunate to be part of a very open-minded church that embraces doubt and embraces questions. My pastor knows I wrote this book. He wants to read it. The children's,
I'll send him a copy for free.
Yeah, he'll take it. We got a new children's pastor, and I was talking about all this with her, and she was so sweet, said, well, as your kids come to Sunday school, if there's stuff you're hearing that you don't like coming from your atheistic perspective, let me know and I'll try to tweak and tone things down. So the fact that they would even cater to a non-believing parent at church, I just think I have a very special church. But for folks who don't have that, I think you can find meaning through friendships that you make, organically throughout life through interests. If you're into rock climbing, you start to see the same faces at the gym. You make friends through your kids' friends and their parents, potentially through volunteering, things like that. So I think you have to put maybe a little more effort into it. Church is a very nice built-in way to get community. You just show up on Sunday and start to see the same faces, but you can do that anywhere. You can do that, at the gym, at a favorite bookstore, coffee shop kind of thing. So I think it to be a little more intentional potentially, but just find out the topics that interest you and see if there's a group out there doing that, and then make your community there.
I think our muscles for making community outside of church aren't as strong as they could be, and I think you'd be surprised what you're able to do once you get better at that. And you'll find there is a wider world of meaning actually, and it will affect your theology in that, for that matter.
Yeah.
All right, last check. What do you want someone to get out of the book as they're reading it and they've turned the last page? What's the feeling that you're hoping they walk away with?
I hope people are left with a feeling of hope. When I initially stopped believing in God, I felt very lost. And so I hope I give people, just highlight an optional path. Not, I don't try to at all prescribe this is what you should believe now, or you better think this, but just an option of a new way to look at the world and have a pathway forward and out of kind of the mist of coming out of a deconversion experience. So I hope they have a sense of positivity, of hope, of there is a rich, rewarding life waiting for you outside of religion or outside of spiritual practice, or still within a spiritual practice, incorporating new things. But I just hope to help people be seen, to let them know they're not alone, and to show them a way forward after a big identity shift, like leaving your religion.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to see this book come out. How can people find you? Where is it best to find you?
I've got a website. It's sarahhennhayward.com. Sarah's with an H, Henn, HENN.com, Sarah Henn Hayward, sorry. And then I'm on Instagram at S Hayward Writes. And so I try to stay active on there, and people can reach out and say hi, and yeah, come find me.
Awesome. Well, I'm trying to remember now too, because this is on a Lake Drive Books YouTube channel. So if you are watching this at this point, please like and subscribe to
Yes.
this video. Help Sarah's rankings go up, and you know, it's really important to help make these books discoverable, and for these stories to get out there. And that's what we're trying to do at Lake Drive Books, is tell real life stories. And yours is wonderfully written, and I hope people really enjoy it. Thank you so much. It's been great to work with you so far, and I'm looking forward to more.
Thank you. Likewise, David. Thanks.
Thanks.